Before I turn the platform over to today's moderator, I have a couple of brief housekeeping details to review for today's event. We'll be hearing brief presentations from each of the speakers in sequence. If you have any questions for them, you're welcome to use, down at the bottom there is a Q&A button. You're welcome to use that function at the bottom of your screen at any time to submit a question. After each of the presentations, our moderator will follow up with a few questions to the panelists, and then we'll open it up to discussion for audience questions. So with that, I'm delighted to welcome today's moderator, Kelsey Otero, who is the Associate Director of Social Innovation at Marquette University. I'll pass it over to you, Kelsey.
Thanks, Cecily. Welcome, everyone. Thanks for joining and taking time out of your day to learn a little bit more about social enterprises in Wisconsin and some of the resources that are helping to propel them forward through this COVID-19 crisis. As Cecily mentioned, my name is Kelsey Otero. I'm the Associate Director of Social Innovation at Marquette University, and I have been partnering with WARF now for a couple of years on the Force for Positive Change program, and that is how we got to meet one of our panelists today, who was a winner from this past year's Force for Positive Change program. But WARF and Marquette University have been talking for a long time about the powerful role that social enterprises play in our state's economy, recovery efforts, and really tackling deep-seated social issues. And I think now more than ever is a time when we need to reinvigorate, re-inspire our social enterprises, rethink the role and the impact that they're having, and elevate that work. And I've seen now more than ever before, new people are coming forward that have ideas. I think this time has given us an opportunity to reflect on what we feel passionate about, what we care about, and start to put ideas into action. And so we're gonna tease out a couple of those different themes over the next hour. And I have the privilege, like I said, of moderating, asking some questions, but I want to encourage you guys to be able to ask questions as well of our fabulous lineup of panelists today. And so with that, I'm going to turn it over to our first panelist, Winnie. She's the founder of Madam, and she is also a Forbes 30 Under 30 winner. So I think you all can learn a ton and will totally be inspired and blown away by her words and what she's been able to do. So Winnie, take it away.
Well, thank you so much, Kelsey, and thank you to WARF for putting this webinar together. I'm really excited to kind of share with you some of the things that we've been doing at Madam. So Madam is a Dane County-based nonprofit with the mission of equipping and engaging girls and students of color with opportunities in the technology sector. So we offer after-school and out-of-school programs for students in rising 6th to 12th grade, getting them prepared for careers in the tech field through web development, app development, hardware programming. And so when you know, the sort of COVID pandemic kind of hit, one of the big things for us is we really had to think about how do we take the programs that we do in person and start to reimagine and reconfigure what that looks like for it to be in a virtual space. So for us, we had some spring break programs sort of set up in advance for students, for some of our high school students to actually work with a financial institution. And knowing that we wouldn't be able to go into the office to do this, we sort of initially, we actually canceled the program. And then we started to realize, well, it seems like this is gonna be longer than we anticipated. Let's sort of put it out to our students and see if they'd be interested in sort of a virtual program. And we got a good response back from our students. And so we hosted a week-long virtual program where students learned web development, learned about activism, and together in teams of 3 built websites about things that they care about. So students built websites about internet inequality, climate change, and emissions out into the atmosphere. And so from that experience, you know, one of the big things that students said were when they left the program, they felt inspired, accomplished, and that they had a high sense of achievement. And so we knew that we wanted to be able to continue to provide programs in the virtual platform. So for the sort of last 6 weeks and for the next 2 weeks remaining in May, we've actually been releasing weekly virtual programs for students in coding and in math. And that was something that was really important to us to make sure that that students continue that learning, but we also know that during this time, right, that there is going to be a widening of the achievement gap. And so how do we come in with some form of mitigation and keep students engaged, give them something that's going to be fun to do, and that's also going to, you know, it's going to be structured and will have some sort of time allocation into their day. That is what I've heard from parents, is that they needed some sort of structure. And so we were able to, that's been something that we've been offering. And as we go into summer, one of the biggest things that we've really learned is, you know, there is a need for taking these programs that we do in person, putting them on a virtual platform, adapting the day so that it works for students, but really continuing to make sure that they're engaged with the skill sets that we are all reliant on at this moment, right? We're all on this Zoom call. We've all been reliant on our emails, Google Meets, you know, Microsoft Teams, right? All of those are digital products that are that were created by somebody. And so our whole goal and our mission as an organization is to make sure that we have diverse students and we have a diverse representation of technology products that are built. And so it's just a reflection of this need that we have, and illuminates the fact that we need to make sure that all students, and specifically students of color who have been underrepresented, get access to these skill sets. So that's what we've been doing the past couple of weeks, and our intention for the summer is fully virtual programs.
That is amazing, and I'm really excited to pick your brain a little bit further on in this discussion about how you pivoted so quickly and some of your best practices that may be able to help inspire others. But now I want to turn it to John quickly, John McIntyre with American Family Institute for Corporate and Social Impact, to share a little bit from the impact investors side.
Thanks, Kelsey. Hi, everybody. I'm glad to be here today and give you a little bit of an investor perspective on what's going on with the COVID-19 crisis. I have a couple of slides, so I'm going to just share my screen quickly. And you should be seeing that now. Got it? Good. So some of you might have heard of the American Family Insurance Institute for Corporate and Social Impact. We've been around now for just about 1.5 years. Of course, we have many different programs at American Family Insurance that support our community, nonprofits, for-profits, all around social impact. This particular organization that we put together when we launched the Spark Building back at the end of 2018, we, along with a couple other organizations for American Family, are in that building. Of course, we're not in there right now, and of course, we're really missing seeing you all. We have a beautiful community space up on the 8th floor where we're housed in the building, and which, of course, is closed for a while, but we're looking forward to seeing everybody again, hopefully later this summer or fall. Of course, those schedules are all up in the air. I think many of you have probably been to the Spark Building, though, and there's a lot of other organizations in the building, like Generator and Starting Block, and some other venture firms, as well as lots of startups. So that's where we're located. Just to make sure everybody understands, what's the Institute about specifically? So our mission is closing equity gaps. And the way we do that is through investment. We make investments in startups as a venture capital firm. So that's a little bit different because we are looking for companies who sell equity. So almost by definition, that means for-profit companies, or maybe they're public benefit companies that have some kind of hybrid nonprofit for-profit setup. But the reason we decided to focus on that is we were looking for ways to sustain and grow social impact. And with our fund, if the companies we invest in are successful, we're able then to grow our fund. So like most venture funds, we'd like to have a second, third, fourth fund over years, over decades for that matter, and we can continue to regenerate more funding for additional new companies. So that's one of the reasons we decided on a venture setup for our fund and targeting companies that are looking to sustain and grow themselves over the long run. So we're a double bottom line fund. I don't know if you've heard that term before, but the two things we look at is we're trying to get social impact, and we do that through the companies. They're bringing great solutions to the marketplace, and we're trying to get a financial return of some sort on our portfolio as a whole, like any venture fund. So that gives us long-term sustainability, as I just said. We focus on 4 areas where we chose to look at, where we see big gaps in our communities, in our society as a whole. The 4 areas are learning and academic achievement. We know there's a lot of gaps in academic achievement, depending on really, where you're born and how your school system is funded. So we're funding startups to look at that. Healthy youth development's different. It's not education per se, but all things that go into young people and how they develop, mental health and other aspects of that. Economic opportunity and inclusion. So we started looking at the mass incarceration issue, but it's broader than just that. There's many, many people disenfranchised from our economy. And now as we go into a recessionary period for, that could get much worse. So we're looking for ways to get people connected into the economy. And finally, resilient communities. That's our focus on climate change and the impacts it's having, particularly on poorer communities. So how can we bring solutions to the marketplace to minimize climate change, we hope, but also adjust to it and mitigate it. So that's where we do our investments in those 4 areas. And here's our portfolio. I'm excited to show everybody this. This is kind of our first graphic we put together after about a year of making investments. We have 9 companies in our portfolio, and you can see along the top the stage at which they are as a company in their funding, from pre-seed all the way through Series B. And at the bottom, you can see the 4 different areas that we invest in that I just mentioned. So there's 4 in resilient communities, 2 in healthy youth development, 1 in economic opportunity, and several in learning and academic achievement. So this portfolio is growing very quickly. These are the people behind these businesses, and they're the important ones. Focusing on the social entrepreneurs is really what we do, and we're very excited about these companies. Just wanted to spend one slide on talking about resilient communities. It's been a focus for me. And how are we going to deal with climate change? While we're in the pandemic, it kind of feels like that's backburnered, but I think this is something that's going to happen over generations, over decades. We'll continue to feel the impacts of climate change, so it's something we'll have to continue to focus on. So we're looking at clean energy solutions to bring to the market. Water quality and quantity needs to be managed. Here in the East, we get a lot more rain than we used to, so how do we manage that? And out in the West, we see more wildfires. So we also invest in disaster planning startups. We also partner both locally and nationally. So you'll see a number of logos here of local organizations like Sustain Dane and Jet Constellations in Milwaukee, the Water Council, but also nationally with MIT, Greentown Labs in Boston, Imagine H2O in San Francisco, and Powerhouse in Oakland. So we're looking both locally and nationally with our programs. Last thing to talk about is our pandemic. So it does have a huge impact. Every time we have an economic downturn, the venture community and the startup community is impacted dramatically. Most startups are just building their business models, so they don't have a regular flow of revenue. They rely on funding. And so when something like this happens, we get a rush of funding requests from startups. And of course, we can only manage so many. So that means it's tough slaying for a lot of startups who were counting on getting funding maybe later this year, but now it's very uncertain on that. Our team's been busier than ever with funding. We have already approved about 4 investments this year, but we've got a queue now of companies that we've invested in before and new companies that we're trying to work through. For the startups, of course, it's all about the burn rate and survival. So a lot of startup advice is to do whatever you have to do to get through the crisis. Clamp down on your burn rate. Try to build a long runway. 12 months is a long time for a lot of companies, depending on the revenue situation. 24 is even better, but that's really a long time for a lot of companies. So efficiency is critical. even if it reduces the growth rate a little bit. Look for grants where possible. So a lot of these companies don't always think about grants, but maybe this is the time to do it. And think about your customers. Every dollar in revenue you can bring in from a customer is a dollar more survival for you. So the good news is there is a silver lining on all downturns, and that we will emerge from this. And it's usually a huge growth time for startups. A lot of people who lose their jobs go think about doing a startup. I did it at one point in the 2001 downturn. Went and worked on a startup for a few years, and as we emerged out of the recession, a lot of capital started to flow again. So position yourself to get through the current crisis and get ready for a big uptick in business, whether it be later this year or next year. That's what you want to do to position yourself. That's it for me.
Awesome. Thanks, John. I'm excited to dig in a little bit more to that impact investing landscape with you later in this session.
Sure.
But now we're going to turn it over to the person who kicked this all off, Cecily, from UW-Madison's Discovery to Product program. And I learned before we started this that you used to own your own business. So I'm sure you will have some great advice for us throughout the course of today's session as well.
Well, thank you, Kelsey. I really appreciate that. And thank you to WARF for asking me to speak. As a reminder, my name is Cecily Brose. I've been a mentor at Discovery to Product at the University of Wisconsin-Madison for almost 2 years now. And I also have slides, so I'm going to share these with you. Okay, so our mission at D2P is to foster the Wisconsin idea by helping transform groundbreaking innovations into products and services that change the world. I'm thrilled to be here today to talk about the topic of social entrepreneurship. A little bit about me is that I have 20 years of experience in the consumer product industry, with the majority of my career spent leading research and development innovation teams for Kraft Foods, both in the Chicagoland area and here at Oscar Mayer in Madison. And then also I have experience owning my own retail business. At Discovery to Product, we serve faculty, staff, and students at UW-Madison. Our programs center around 4 pillars: trainings, grants, one-on-one mentoring, and culture building. From a culture building standpoint, we aim to blur the lines between the university and the community by developing strong community networks and partnerships around innovation and entrepreneurship. So one of the things we do is partner with WARF to put on these types of webinars and series. I've been leading an initiative at D2P to expand our curriculum to ensure we're covering the broad spectrum of types of entrepreneurship, including social entrepreneurship. We were very fortunate to have the opportunity to consult with Jeff Snell from the Office of Continuing Education, who has a rich background in social entrepreneurship. We just finished our spring Innovation to Market class and are now gearing up for our summer online class. For those UW-Madison faculty, staff, or students that are listening, applications are due May 15th. You're going to go to d2pwisc.edu for more information. You know, similar to many organizations, and like many of the entrepreneurs that are listening today, we had to pivot during the pandemic to change how we offer our programs. So this is going to be a similar theme. I think that we're going to continue to hear over the next hour. We've had to change how we offer our programs, moving them online, how we mentor our individuals and teams. I spend a lot of time on Zoom and WebEx talking to my teams, and then the type of information we're sharing with our community. The wonderful thing about times like this, if we can kind of tease out the good things that are happening, is that it gives us a chance to challenge paradigms. I mentor a lot of very early stage entrepreneurs. They may have not, started their business yet, or their social endeavor, and they're very early on in the idea stage, really building what their mission and business is going to look like. And I've had to encourage them to focus in 3 different areas. And I just want to go through some of the questions that I pose to them in these 3 areas to get everybody thinking about how we can use this time period to our advantage. The first is to stay positive. I know that this can be difficult. and it's a very trying time, but there's so much for us to learn in this moment. We're in the midst of a huge natural experiment that we can embrace. You know, how do you take advantage of this particular time period? It's a chance to see the world through a different lens. We don't get many chances like this where we're kind of the whole world is globally turned upside down. And so how can you use this time to be more relevant and innovative? And how can you change the dialogue going forward? Your client and customer needs may be greater than ever. Are there novel ways to serve them using technology or other channels that you haven't thought of before? The second is to maintain perspective. How is this going to change the world going forward? I think we can all agree that pre-COVID will not look the same as post-COVID. What are those new problems? I mean, this is a great opportunity to find new problems that need to be solved. And start to think about how the world is going to be changed and what challenges and opportunities lie ahead. It's also a chance for you, if you have an existing business, to learn new ways of doing business that could change the way you do business in the future to improve operations and reduce costs. Are you finding maybe that you can do more with less and can get even more creative with the ways that you're meeting the needs of your clients and customers? And the third is to channel perseverance. This is the time to hustle. You have to stay focused on your dreams. You know, who can you reach out to that you haven't spoken with in a long time? What new relationships can you forge? People are looking for ways to connect beyond their homes. I don't know about you guys, but I'm really looking forward to the day when I can get out of my home again. And sometimes when I have those connections, even if it's over a computer screen, I feel a lot better. So I think people are striving for connections and want to be part of something bigger than themselves. And there's a vast amount of underutilized talent right now waiting to be called back to work or looking for new work. How can you engage that talent in your operation now to serve your clients or customers, but also look for longer term relationships for volunteers, employees, funders? There's a lot of opportunities from that standpoint. I know that activating this advice can sometimes be tough, and everyone's in different situations. So I would encourage you also to make sure to seek out help to get you through these challenging times. These are the times to check back in with your mentors, with people who maybe help you build your social enterprise. Check back in with them and see if they have ideas on how you can be successful going forward. So I will end it there and pass it back to Kelsey.
Thank you for that. How inspiring. And now we're going to turn it over to the panel portion of our discussion. And so I want to kick it off, Cecily, with you really quickly, since you offered us just some amazing advice. You know, I loved how you talked a lot about being positive, maintaining perspective, and channeling perseverance. And I think those are definitely things for us to always remember, but especially now. But you also talked about how you work with a lot of early stage enterprises, and especially social enterprises. And one of the things that's so critical at this stage is the discovery, customer discovery portion of creating a new business. But that could probably be a little bit challenging right now. So what's your advice to an organization that's first starting out, wanting to do customer discovery, but is probably limited to doing it from their home? How would you suggest that they go about it? What resources might be available, and how do they better understand their problem and customers?
I think the good news is that even though a lot has changed in the world, the process of interviewing and researching is really the same. So the challenge now becomes in finding people that want to talk about the problems that they have and are looking for solutions. This is a tough challenge, no matter if you're under COVID pandemic, is finding people to interview and be able to get those insights in order to be able to really build something that people want and care about. So the question is, how do you find these people in an isolated, situation? And I think the thing I would recommend is people are spending more time online these days. So you've got to go where the people are, and the people are online, and they're using Facebook, Reddit, blogs, Twitter, Pinterest. All of these are potential channels to get people to interview and have conversations with. Interact with these people online. If you've got a chat group in Facebook, let's say you want to find mothers of maybe single mothers. And so you find a Facebook group that's, that is centered around that area, maybe with a particular challenge. Interact with that group online. And then don't be afraid to ask if someone would be willing to have a conversation with you about this, that you're looking to solve, a problem, and you want to understand more about what's happening in their world, in their perspective. The other thing I would say is sometimes interviewing, that word interview can be really intimidating. And so I like to think of them as conversations. And if I reframe it in my mind that I'm going to have a conversation with someone, and I ask someone to have a conversation, then it becomes a little bit more casual and not so formal. And I find that more people will be interested in talking. And then the last piece of advice I would give is be okay with getting no. You have to be okay with asking someone, if they would want to talk to you about, the world that they live in, the problems that they have. And if they say no, then you just move on and plan on asking a lot more people than you're actually going to be able to have conversations with.
That's amazing. Thank you. We had a question come in, and I actually will pose it to Cecily and Winnie. Have you guys seen people use Google Survey to gather customer discovery, or Winnie, in your case, maybe to get feedback from any of your existing customers during this time?
So I would say that within my case, we have seen folks use Google Survey to get that information. I think there have also been people who are using it beforehand. We operated in a strong digital space, so that's something that we've seen continue to grow, and the use of that and forms just like Typeform and things of that sort.
Yeah, I would also add, sometimes people hide behind Google surveys from the standpoint of, instead of having a face-to-face conversation, they use Google survey to try to do that customer discovery and interviewing. And it's great in some situations where there's a lot of yes, no answers, or you want to get more of a quantitative view of the questions that you are asking. Whereas I would say in the customer discovery phase, you want to be able to ask those additional questions and dig deeper and really look for those insights and beyond just the surface answers. And so you want to make sure that you're taking a little bit more of a qualitative approach kind of early on as you're trying to develop those insights. I think there's a place for Google surveys. You just need to use it at the right time.
Thanks, Cecily. I like the social media suggestion too, of joining groups and building up relationships and that way. Winnie, I want to switch to you for a sec. You pivoted really quickly to an online format when all of this started. Can you talk about how you funded that and how important it is to maintain relationships and conversations with your funders about your plans and ideas, especially during this time?
Yeah, so I would say, one of the biggest things for us was as we started thinking about what we're going to do with programs and as we pivot them, we're a small team. So we are a team of 4 people and very agile. So we had to very quickly, really start to rethink what are best practices, sort of do the research and ask our students. So, we reached out and we sort of found out information from them in terms of what are the times of day that are going to work best, that sort of thing. So we really utilized those platforms, and kind of back from the previous question, we were able to use sort of Google survey and our Typeform sort of platforms because we have built already those relationships. So I would say you get a higher response, honestly, if you have those relationships, because people are going to click and say yes. But so that was something that we just surveyed our parents, talked to them through the online media, and got the information back from them around what was going to work. And in terms of funding the initiative and funding our virtual programs, we're still in that phase of continuing to fund our virtual programs. We have always talked about the need for STEM skills as a carry over into the growth of workforce, right? And the need of a diverse STEM workforce. And this has just been something where we've been able to approach our donors and ask them and share with them, because they're seeing the impact of the need for such tech skills right now, that it's a story that we're able to just very much see the need for. So I would say that's been something that's been really important. So talking about like just the power of story, we also had some funds, and very thankful to our amazing donors who reached back out to foundations that we work with, and they, gave us the leeway, and they said, you had funds, we had funds allocated from the grant. If you need to use them in a different way, let us know. And they were very accommodative to that. So one of our funders is the Madison Community Foundation. And so we were able to leverage our year 2 grant for a match campaign we have going on right now. And so just even throughout this time of raising funds and continuing to support our virtual programs, it's been telling the stories, telling the impact, right? And being able to see our students grow. And in this time where there's so much uncertainty, to create a space where students can find inspiration and accomplishment is something that's really important. So being able to provide that space and share that story has been something that's been important to us.
Thanks. And I want to stick with you once more, Winnie, quickly, just because I'm listening to you speak and you just radiate positivity and energy, which I think is contagious. And as Cecily mentioned, that is one of the most important things to maintain during this time. So I want to ask you, how did you build up your own resiliency as a social entrepreneur and tenacity prior to COVID-19? And then how has that helped you as a founder and leader to continue to run Maidam during this time?
Yeah, I would definitely say that like resilience is a muscle that you continue to build. And I am, I'm working out right now, so just to be honest. But, that's been something where for me, when I envisioned Maidam, I think from the beginning, I started to think about what does it look like to have multiple forms of a financial model. And so part of it had to do with, having online content that we could get out to students and outside of educators in Dane County, but into Milwaukee County, into rural spaces. And so for me, when this pandemic hit and we had to respond really quickly, we've been in the place of saying, how is what we're building not just responding to right now, but something that these resources that we're building out, how can they get out to other communities, and how can we be able to utilize this for what I had in plan for year 6, year 7. We're just hitting our 5-year right now. So that's been something that's been, I've had at the back of my mind in terms of thinking about resiliency. And I think back to what John said, there is going to be a time beyond this pandemic. And so continuing to know that and have that as a framework as we build on has been something that has been helpful to me and been helpful to our team, that right now we're kind of at times like putting out fires, but realizing we need to do it in a way that's sustainable for ourselves as individuals, but sustainable for the organization, so that we can easily take what we're building now and create this as a platform for future things in a couple of years down the road. So that's kind of been what our journey has been as an organization. And I would say our team has within ourselves, as part of our DNA, a culture of like a startup culture, an agile culture, and a response to what does our community need and what does it look like for us to show up for our community and to show up for each other as a team.
Oh, that's wonderful. And I just love how forward thinking you are. And John, that was something you definitely alluded to as well. So I want to shift gears a little bit to you and talk about the impact investing landscape. And for any social entrepreneur that might be on the call right now, that's thinking about funding and what their funding needs might look like in the next 6 to 18 months, let's say, what would be your advice to them? And does COVID-19 force them to change track at all?
Yeah, so it does depend exactly where you are with your company. I was alluding to companies that have already started, and so there's a bit of a survival for a period of time and then get ready for growth again. It's interesting because looking at that portfolio I showed you, so many businesses are adversely impacted by the pandemic. Some are actually helped. So one of the companies we funded can detect COVID-19 in wastewater, so they're going crazy right now. They're trying to figure out how to scale very fast. So it really does matter where you're at. But say you're very early stage and maybe it's still at the idea stage. As we were talking about earlier, you can still do customer development anytime. You can do that cheaply. You don't need a lot of money. So you could look at putting together ideas and test them out with customers or potential customers for very low cost. You can explore partners. So, a lot of investors want to see strong partnerships, usually 2 people, could be 3. Maybe somebody that's technically strong, somebody more business strong or has good design skills, so a balanced team. You could investigate who would be a good partner for a potential business I'm thinking about if I'm looking to work on that while I have some downtime through the crisis. And then when you're thinking about actually getting money to fuel your business, as I said earlier, think about if it's a socially oriented, mission-driven business, it can be a nonprofit, it can be a for-profit, it can be a hybrid. So you can think about those different models. One of the things we do with your program, Kelsey, the Boost program at Marquette, is talk about that. Is there a customer for your service or product, and can you charge them money, or is there someone in that value chain? Because if you can not just rely on grants, if you're a socially minded, a mission-driven startup, that gives you more flexibility, particularly in a downturn like this, where you can look at customers and grant givers to help you through this time. So think about that business model that would make sense. And what you can do with investors is, hey, I just want a little bit of your time, 15, 30 minutes. We can do a virtual cup of coffee. And I have 3 questions about this business or potential business. Could you help me explore those questions? And I think most investors will give you that time, even if you aren't a real prospect for investment for them. Just ask questions. And in that way, you get to know them, they get to know you, and you never know. In 3, 6, 12 months, you may have an opportunity to meet them again when you have a real investment opportunity that you want to show them. And they're already kind of familiar from the early days about what this business idea was. So continue to work your networks of investors, customers, potential partners through this time would be my recommendation.
I love that virtual coffee suggestion and reaching out. You have nothing to lose. I think now is the best time probably to take advantage of that. I have another question for you, because you mentioned some social enterprises you guys are working with have benefited from this, and you I know are out talking with a ton of social enterprises. So I'm curious if you've seen any really unique or uplifting approaches, organizations that have pivoted and done some cool things as a result of this that you'd be able to share with everyone on the call that's listening in.
Yeah. Again, every business is a little different, so you got to get creative about what makes sense here. So one of the businesses we're looking at right now is community solar. So most people can't access solar because they don't own a house, they don't have a rooftop, they may not have the money, even if they do have their own building. But most of us live in apartments, condos, and we don't have a lot of money sitting around to put solar panels on them. And so that company is really challenged, but also sees an opportunity because the way you sell community solar is at the community level. It's neighbors, or it could be any type of community. Say it's a religious community around your church or your synagogue or whatever it may be. It could be a business community. But you're going in with a group of people to decide to put some money towards supplying your home or your business with solar. And essentially what this company does, they're called Solstice, they connect that community group with the solar developers who actually will build a solar farm somewhere around your community and then manages that. So the problem with that right now is that's neighbors getting together, usually physically, and having like a meeting in the evening or something to discuss, everybody want to go in on a solar project? You can't do that right now. So they're doing it virtually. In some ways, it's a superior way to sell solar because I think all of us have experienced going to the Home Depot or the Lowe's or have somebody knock on your door that is trying to sell you solar. And that's not always open and receptive to that. So whereas if your neighbor approaches you saying, hey, why don't we all go in together on a solar project and come on over and have a drink and we can talk about it. How do you replicate that online? Again, using online meetings or Zoom or whatever it may be to do that. So that's their big challenge, to continue to grow community solar in a virtual way. But I would say it's actually a superior selling model than many other models out there. So they see it as a big opportunity.
Thanks. And John, we had a question come in for you in the Q&A chat, and this is probably a good time to remind other people that if they do have questions, don't hesitate to type them in. So if you don't mind sharing a little bit more about one or more of the 9 companies that currently make up the Amtham Institute's current portfolio. People would love to hear a little bit more about some of these social enterprises, the work that they're doing, and maybe a reflection about how some of them fit into the different 4 pillars that you guys invest in.
Okay. Is it okay if I share my screen again?
Go for it.
Just so I don't. Now, I could spend a lot of time on this, and I don't want to absorb.
That might be a whole session in of itself.
Yeah, so I'll quickly just touch on a few of these and cut me off if I'm going too long here, because obviously investors love to talk about the companies they've invested in. So I'll quickly go through them, I guess, left to right. So Vincere Health is Healthy Youth Development on the far left. So they're coming out of Harvard, and they've developed an app and a process to deal with addictive behavior. And it's actually a way to pay people to get over their addictive behavior. They're starting with cigarettes. So instead of doing a patch or something like that, you actually get paid not to smoke, and they can monitor it with your smartphone. So the broader set of things, though, they're going to go after is all kinds of addictive behavior. The next one is BioBot, coming out of MIT, I mentioned earlier. They can detect chemicals, bacteria, and viruses in wastewater, so they're monitoring wastewater. The next one's called Block Power. They're upgrading older commercial and multi-residential homes, electrifying them so they can use solar energy, and moving to much more efficient heating, air conditioning, and lighting systems. They just launched a project last month in Milwaukee. They're out of New York, but they've now here in Wisconsin. Next one is Book Nook. So this gets around the whole issue of kids that struggle with reading at an early age. So it's an online reading assistant for teachers or other adults helping kids to read. And they opened up their platform to all parents for free during the pandemic, because usually they sell it into school systems or other organizations. But if you go to Book Nook and you've got kids at home learning to read, it's available for free right now. Equity helps, again, with kids in college mostly who have run out of funding. So a lot of people drop out of college because they can't make it work financially. So they do financing and loans to get people through crises. So that's an example of a company that's raising more money right now, because there's a lot of kids right now that may have restaurant jobs or whatever it may be that can't make ends meet. So that Equity is helping them survive through this. Pigeonly helps people who are incarcerated connect with their families. So they created a phone service essentially that's much cheaper than what the prisons offer. So families can connect with their loved ones in prison, and a database so you can actually find your loved ones. So a lot of people lose their loved ones in prison. Storm Sensor is the Google Maps of sewers. So a lot of sewer systems, Milwaukee's a good case in point here, suffer from, when flooding happens, it also involves the sewage, which goes out, in Milwaukee's case, into Lake Michigan. Milwaukee had to spend billions of dollars on the Deep Tunnel project. With Storm Sensor, you can set up, you can now monitor your sewer systems so you can see what's happening to your flows and do green infrastructure. X2.ia is a mental health company that has an app. It's a chat bot for mental health. It literally is available 24/7 to anybody who has access to it. And it's being made available here in Wisconsin for free. I know we're working on that right now to help people who are struggling with depression, which in times like this, a lot of people will be, that they have an automated way to talk to somebody, that if it gets bad enough, they can put you in touch with special services to help people avoid, suicide or other things like that. And finally, one concern is our disaster technology. They do geospatial maps that can help model and predict earthquakes, wildfires, and flooding. So that's it. Any questions on that? I'm glad to take.
Thanks, John. I couldn't help to notice that a lot of the portfolio companies are located on the coasts. What are your thoughts? I'm going to throw you a curveball, but what are your thoughts on how we get more social enterprises from the Midwest into the pipeline? Or are you guys already working on that right now?
We are, so as a venture fund, our call is to, in those categories, find the best companies we can in the country. We do want to build up the ecosystem, though, here in the Midwest and in Wisconsin. So we do work directly with accelerators and so on to help build our ecosystem. So I have this slide from earlier. So, let's see, are they not on here? I just noticed they're not on here. This is, the reason is this one's particularly focused on clean tech and sustainable organizations. But Generator, we work with Generator a lot here. We work with your organization at the 707 Hub with social enterprises. So we're trying through partnerships to build companies from scratch. We do it all over the country, but we're also trying to do it more here. I'm working with the Water Council in Milwaukee right now to try to come up with some new programs on that area. So generally it's through partnering to help get more companies into our pipeline than just the big tech centers as you mostly see here from the coast.
Great, thanks. And Cecily, I want to turn to you. If someone has had an idea or they were inspired by some of the portfolio companies that John just shared with us, what would be your advice as to anyone right now as we get off this call about how they could take the first step to putting their social enterprise into action?
Well, sometimes the first step is the hardest, just like getting going, right? first off, I think you need to analyze for yourself, like, is this something that you're passionate about? Is this a dream that you have that you want to pursue? I think that passion goes a really long way. And finding things, you know, that impact you, that you have a story around. I think that is a good leading indicator of, you know, can you pursue your idea and can it be successful? I think it's certainly a time to do interviewing, but it's a great time to do research. You know, we're all at home. You know, don't watch the next Netflix great, you know, series. You know, start to do research. Google is your friend. Become the smartest person in the room on your topic of interest, and dive down deep and learn everything that you can. Get educated, and then go find people to talk to. Don't assume that no one wants to talk during this time period. People really are looking for connections with each other, and you just got to go for it. You can't sit and wait. So if there's any advice I would give is just go, like, just do it.
For those of you who know me, I often say, marry yourself to the problem, get to know it really well. Don't marry yourself to the solution that you think is so great. You need to become the expert on the problem that you're trying to solve. So I love that you shared that. Can you share with us, Cecily, any D2P resources that you want to make sure people are aware of as they do start to move along with their social enterprise idea?
Yeah, we've got great resources at innovate.wisc.edu. So a number of organizations on campus have come together as the Innovate Network. And while it's primarily focused on UW-Madison, there are lots of other connections to community resources as well. There's a connect button or ask a question button on that innovate.wisc.edu. And you can go on there and ask a question. I'm looking for resources in whatever it may be. And we try to get you connected with the right person. Oftentimes the challenge is, like, you know that there's a lot of resources out there, but you're not sure who do I go to and when. So sometimes it's helpful to go to a resource like innovate.wisc.edu, ask a question, and then hopefully we'll get you connected to the right person at the right time. There's also great, you know, the Madison Chamber of Commerce, the Small Business Development Center. I've seen a lot of, especially during this COVID pandemic, you know, there are resources out there to help you. You've just got just Google. Get in there, dive in, and see, you know, where you can find the resources to help. There's lots out there.
I want to put in a plug for a couple of additional resources. John mentioned Generator. They're doing a G-Alpha program coming up, specifically geared towards social enterprises in a couple of their thematic areas. So Google that. Happy to send out some resources as well to anyone after this. And then Marquette University will be doing a virtual boot camp this summer for social enterprises. So again, happy to, I'm sure WARF will help share some additional resources from programs across the state for those of you that are interested in pursuing your idea further. I want to encourage people that have a question that haven't asked it yet to put it into the chat, because we're almost out of time. And while people do that, I have one last question for you guys. So I think we can all agree that social enterprises are probably needed now more than ever if we are going to recover successfully as an economy and a country. And so I just want to kind of pick your brain. What do you think that means for the social enterprise landscape? And why does that give you hope? So Winnie, as a social entrepreneur yourself, what's your thoughts on what role social enterprises will play?
Yeah, so it is my big hope that as we sort of continue to work towards days and months that are back to regular, I call it, that we won't step back into normal, because normal was not great for everybody, right? And normal isn't what is, I would say, sustainable and quality of life and thriving. And so this is, for me, the role that social entrepreneurs play is we get to help reimagine what our life and what our world can look like for so many in our communities. And so I'm hoping to see more creative solutions in the social entrepreneurship space. I would say, like, right now, people are just really rethinking. I think there's an openness around things, you know, ideas to be funded, solutions. There's just been such an exacerbation of inequalities in our communities, in our country, in the world. And so folks who, you know, this is a time where folks who've been thinking about something can really start to put, you know, pen to paper and start brainstorming, asking questions, you know, talking to folks, and really starting to say, you know, what role can they play in sort of building companies that are going to be socially minded and have, you know, a double, triple bottom line. So, yeah.
John or Cecily, care to add to that about why you think social enterprises are so critical right now?
I can chime in. I think there's been this movement that's gaining momentum over the last 10 years about, you know, how do we better support social enterprises? Those of us who are ecosystem developers, how do we encourage more people to look at their potential businesses as socially impactful? Different, you know, as I've already talked about, you know, different ways to approach your business model. There's lots of different aspects to this, and there's a lot of supports out there to do that. So I've been seeing, you know, over the last 10 years, this is a building movement for startups that are mission driven in social enterprises. I don't think you ever like figure it all out, but I think, as Winnie just said, there are such glaring gaps in our society, and when you hit crises like this and economic downturns, it becomes even more apparent where we have such huge gaps in equity in America. So I think this generation of entrepreneurs that are coming along see that and understand that and want to do something about it. And hopefully we're giving them more tools and more approaches to work on that. So that's the hope coming out of any crisis like this, is that this adds momentum to folks who want to spend their time, their money, their focus, their energy, their passion on, you know, changing the world. And one way to do it is, not the only way, but one way to do it is through working with a startup, on a startup, doing a startup, and tackling a problem from scratch.
I'll just add, I love the fact that we're moving into a world where it's not like people aren't put in these boxes, like you're a for-profit, you're nonprofit, you know, it's this, the lines of entrepreneurship really are being blurred. And I think that it's allowing you to be creative and to dream, like, this is how I think it can, this is how I think that my social enterprise can be built. And yes, I can still make money, and I can still generate revenue, and I can still do good things. I can still employ people and help the environment and do, you know, all the things that need to happen can be done. And it's unveiling new creative business models, which I think is very inspiring. And I think that was happening before COVID, but even this is just, hopefully, is just helping to accelerate the movement.
I think we're at time. So Cecily, I'm going to, you can even believe it, I'm going to turn it over to you for kind of our wrap up and final words.
Gosh, I felt like time went so fast. Okay. So I'm going to wrap this up. So I want to thank all of our panelists, Winnie and John. It was wonderful to have a conversation with you both, and especially want to thank Kelsey Otero from Marquette University, our moderator. As I said, I think it was a really great conversation, and I think that there's continuing going to be just fabulous things coming in the future. So we will be posting the link to this video on warf.org/entrepreneurons in the coming days. And we want to thank everyone for joining us, and be well. Thank you.